In the next 35 to 45 minutes. Sound good? Okay, so let's pick up at, oh, we're still in the front. Okay. So we're looking at Roman numeral V, 5, I guess that would be. Letter C. You don't have to follow along with this. This is just a way for me to keep track, and some people like to jot notes. So the pre-labor signs, we talked about Braxton Hicks contractions, but those can happen anytime from 20 weeks on. You can have a burst of energy, which is that kind of nesting thing. They call it diarrhea in there. It's not so much diarrhea, it's more like a loosening of your stools, and that happens about 24 hours before labor can start. And typically, that's the body's way of saying, okay, I'm emptying out so I don't push this stuff out on the table, because I don't know if anyone wrote that down on their fears, but that's a lot of people's fears, right? Is pooping on the table. And so you do have a loosening of your stools, and it's not so much diarrhea running to the bathroom. It is more, oh, this is different because I've been constipated the whole pregnancy, and now this is feeling a little bit looser. And then that lightning feeling where the baby engages in your pelvis, which I have to say I never experienced because I kept my babies right up here, which is possibly part of the reason why I had a hard time pushing them where they needed to go. And then you can have some cramps. They can be back cramps. They can actually also be upper inner thigh cramps that you can feel with them. So those are pre-labor. Then you have the preliminary signs, which is you can have some bloody show, but you typically have that when you're a little further along in labor. You can have that loss of the mucus plug that they talked about. So right now, everyone's sitting here who has a baby in their belly has a plug that's right there at your cervix, and that's keeping anything that's not supposed to be up there out. And again, they talked about it is exactly like it sounds. So we don't need to go into it. But a little anecdotal story. I was attending a labor and delivery of this woman, and she called me and she thought maybe she had lost her mucus plug, and then it turns out her husband had thrown a half-sucked-on Cherry Jolly Rancher in the toilet that he didn't want. And she was really excited until she figured out that it was not the mucus plug. It was just a Jolly Rancher. But it was actually a really good analogy, because that's kind of what I think they could look like. They're a little bit, not quite as bright and artificial looking, but she was excited, but it wasn't. So you can have your loss of mucus plugs, but that can happen a couple of weeks before. But what's happening, we have our can't be analogies, I'm so sorry. We have our roll of lifesavers, and things are stretching out a little bit. What's holding that in there is not holding it in there anymore. So the mucus plug can fall out. And then contractions, this is a preliminary sign still. Contractions don't get stronger or harder as time goes by, and they come and go without regularity when you move or rest. So for example, if you're lying in bed and it's 2:30 in the morning and you start to feel some contractions and your due date's about 13, 14 days away or closer or whatever, and you say, oh, we're having contractions, and you wake up your husband and you give a little nudge, and then you start timing them, but then you get up and they totally go away and you're totally able to go to work. That's not real labor. That's just a preliminary sign that labor is coming. Okay? So the inverse is also can happen where you're walking along and you're having your busy day and you're having contractions all day, then you go to lie down and you take a bath. If the contractions go away, you're not quite yet in the labor stage. Okay? So positive signs of labor, that labor is imminent, are progressing contractions. So things are moving along, and you do notice that that timing is moving in the right direction. Contractions don't go away with movement or relaxation. They're there. They're sticking around. So what you do is not getting rid of them. So let's say you take a bath and you still have them, and you get up and you take a walk, you still have them. That's a positive sign. They get closer over time. It's another positive sign. That's what you want, okay, obviously. Another positive sign is your water can break, but only about 20% of women's water breaks. It's actually more like 13 to 20. Sometimes with my first two, my water didn't break at all, and then my third, I'm a counselor at the alternative high school, and I was sitting in conferences, and I'm like, gosh, I just feel like I keep peeing my pants. I know I'm pregnant, but come on. I know my due date's tomorrow. I mean, clearly I didn't put it all together. And so I talked to my mom, and she said, well, I think your water broke. I said, no, come on, no, it's not going to do that. And sure enough, they have this test. You go into the doctor's office, and they will test with a little pH strip. and they will see if that if what's coming out of you is indeed amniotic fluid, or could it just be pee? We don't know. So they test it, and if your water has broken, you get admitted into our hospital at that time, if they determine that. Our hospital likes to have women whose water broken there with them and not sitting at home. Can anyone tell me why? Do I have any hospital employees in this room? Which part do you work in?
In the main area.
Okay.
The patient care
Admission.
area. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Can you tell me why? Why do they like it?
Because you're in labor pretty much.
Because you're in labor, but you can labor at home if you're having just contractions, if your water hasn't broken. Why would they want you in there?
Infection.
Increased risk of infection.
Exactly. Once your water breaks, nothing is in there that's actually like really keeping all that bad stuff out. And so they do limit vaginal checks, after your water breaks, and because there's that infection. And within 24 to 36 to 48 hours, the risk of infection to baby after your water breaks increases significantly. So if they see that your water's broken, they say, oh, why don't you come on in? Yeah.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So the things that we watched, so after your water breaks, they were like, oh, you can't go in the bath and you can't do things. But then some people have water bursts, and so I was just wondering, like what? Because the risk of infection, I guess, is the reason. But
so
I think
you can still go in the bath. I've seen plenty of women go in the bath after the water is broken. I think that's part of one of those risks. Certainly, and we'll talk about this next week when we talk about induction. Sex is actually an induction method because semen has prostaglandin in it, and that can help ripen or start dilating a ripe cervix. But you certainly, after your water's broken, you do not want to use that as your induction method at that point. Bath is fine. And a lot of times, your water breaks and it is just a trickle and you don't really know. And so you do all these things and you don't know that it's broken and you took a bath and maybe you did have sex or something like that, and it's not the end of the world by any means. So, but they do want to limit vaginal checks because that is introducing something else. And they also, if you are strep B positive, which you will get tested at about 37 weeks, that's an infection that you can have in your vagina that will introduce some things that you don't want to introduce to the baby, and they'll be very careful with checking you if you're strep B positive. Okay. So if your water breaks down low, which as they said in the movie it typically does, it just comes as a trickle because the baby's head is in there. And so not only is the baby still cushioned by the water that still remains in there, but the most important thing that's still cushioned is the umbilical cord. Okay? Because if it's all dried up in there and you don't have any water left in there because it all dribbled out, the umbilical cord is also not protected, and that is the baby's lifeline. So you want that buoyancy around the umbilical cord. So it's fine if your water breaks, but things change. Game is on if your water broke. And when we have our returners come back, I'm going to have one of the people come back. Her water broke at almost, 36 weeks. And, her sister called me and she said, is this really going to happen? I'm like, her water broke. Oh, she has to have this baby. There's no, putting this off for any longer. So if your water breaks, it's not the end of the world. It's amazing, but you will be having that baby in the next 24 to 36 hours, depending on how long your doctor lets you go for. Okay? And we're going to talk next week about if your water breaks and you're not having contractions, because that happens, what do we do? Because then we're talking about having to get that baby out, and if you're not, your body's not telling it to go. It can be intervention land at that point. So I want to talk to you about some other options before that happens. So again, you can check the odor, amount, color, and time. The COAT acronym, or also TACO. That's easier to remember. And basically, what color are you looking for it to be safe? Clear. Yeah. So if it's green or has green tint or an odor that smells funky, you want to report that to your doctor. Okay? And you want to report it breaking anyway, but that becomes a bigger deal because the baby has, bless you, the green equals meconium, and that is the baby's first bowel movement. And typically if babies are in there longer than 40 weeks, they will have that. Or if a baby is under some duress or stress, they will also have that. So it's okay. It doesn't mean anything terrible is going to happen, but it does mean you need to be monitored. Okay, so mine was as clear as could be, and that's why I thought it was pee. And so I was like, oh, I thought all water had something, and it had no odor, it had no color, nothing. So, and then the time. So when you have the doctor's asking you what time it broke, again, you're kind of on the clock. I'm gonna say this on tape, I probably shouldn't, but you know, you can guesstimate. So you don't have to say it was exactly 3:15 that my water broke, because once your water breaks, like I said, you're on the clock and you do have to deliver that baby within a certain time. You could say, I think it was sometime mid-afternoon. You know, I mean, you can be a little vague about that. But you know, because then you're not so much, it's not documented that, you know, this is the time it broke. Unless you want to do it that way. That is your decision. And green water means go. So green means go. That means you go to the hospital and you get monitored there. Okay? Because that means that something's going on that the baby's not totally loving. Because that's not supposed to happen. Again, it's not an emergency, but they're going to monitor that baby's heart rate a little bit more consistently than they would otherwise. Okay, so once we know we're in labor, we get to eat, we get to drink. But remember, sometimes people, no, don't remember because you don't know this. I'm telling you, sometimes people throw up during transition. So anything you eat in early labor might be coming up again. And it's important to eat some mild stuff. You know, hot stuff can kick labor into gear, so some people think. But once you're in labor, I would go mild, pasta, toast, bananas, stuff like that. And then drink as much as you can. And this is because most labors get stalled out because of fear. The other reason is because of dehydration. Okay, that's a killer. And if you're dehydrated, you can't do what you need to do. So recharge, coconut water, Gatorade, regular water, all of it while you're at home. Drink as much as you can.